Since the invention of water, there have been boaters on the sea who insisted on moving faster, moving cooler, and with their own style. They weren't interested in machines used merely for fishing, for skiing, for lounging. They wanted boats that basically, somehow, managed to fly. They're sexy, they're colorful, they're nothing less than roaring art on the water. This is Blue Speed, and you're about to enter the amazing world of performance boating at its finest. These aren't your everyday ordinary engines. Imagine a race car that has to take on all of the H2O on the planet, and you might start to get the big picture. And these aren't your everyday ordinary boats. These are high-end performance machines that can hit 130 miles an hour and still have power to spare. Most of them cost a lot more than your car, and some of them cost more than your house. If you're looking to just lay back and drift out to sea, you're in the wrong place. And you're definitely going to be in the wrong boat. These vessels were made with two words in mind: pure speed.
It's kind of like looking at works of art, like going to a museum or something, only they're like cars, they're automobiles, they're functional art. These are functional art. They just kill you because they go 200 miles an hour and they got 21,000 horsepower blower motors in them, so they command a little bit of respect.
In this hour, we'll explore ultra-high performance boats through the wet and wild world of Scope.
Scope stands for the Southern California Offshore Powerboat Elite.
They're a group of West Coast water junkies who take the art of boating to a whole new level. We'll join them as they hold their annual poker run in Long Beach. That's the game that mixes fast boats with full houses. But first, let's get to know a little more about these people and just what it is that, well, that floats their boats.
So boating itself is fun, being out on the water. You never really have a bad day, even if it's rough or whatever out there on the water, it's great.
They come from all over, with different jobs and different ways in which they fell into the faith. But they all have one thing in common.
Everybody gets really involved in it.
A passion for these boats, along with a want to gather with like-minded enthusiasts. It's that very element that often separates these owners from those you'll find on a houseboat, a fishing boat, or a sailboat. Most of the time, it seems as though those boats are boarded to get away from other people. But performance boat owners often find themselves seeking out other performance boaters. Why? There's probably two good reasons. One, who are you going to brag to about your boat? And two, more important, who are you going to race?
I don't know, I just like the thrill of it. Anything high speed and that kind of ocean, water, that's my favorite thing to do.
So why is Scope attending here today in such full and colorful force? Well, here's the short speech about Long Beach and what's going on there. The whole gang has arrived in order to run a race that's not really a race. How does that work? Only a performance boat owner can fully explain a poker run.
Poker runs you win by chance. They're the luck of the draw. We go to different card stops, we get an envelope that has a playing card in it, and at the end of the poker run we turn them in, they open them up, and they see what hand you have. So you can come out here on a Sea-Doo watercraft or in a $1 million boat, you have the same chance of winning a poker run.
As we've already established, drivers of these boats like to take them from one place to another, but not just on the water. Some of these poker run players will tow their craft across a few state lines half a dozen times a year, just to have a hand in a poker run.
So you won the award today for having traveled the furthest to come to the poker run. Where are you from?
We're from actually Bremerton, Washington, which is about 60 miles west of Seattle.
Wow. And do you often travel this far? Is this a regular kind of tour that you do?
Yeah, in the last couple of years, we've gone to close to 40 poker runs. And this is by far our favorite, and we'll always come back to Scope. But yeah, in the last couple months, we've actually traveled about 6,000 miles to different poker runs.
It has been cleared by the Coast Guard. It is for us to run in.
Once at the event, they'll be given a list of locations. Here in Long Beach, the stops can be anywhere from Balboa Pier to Avalon. circling back around near the Queen Mary. At each stop, the entered boat owner will get a playing card. A card that will eventually make up a poker hand. Once everybody has made the rounds, the hands are tallied and the winners win cash and other prizes. The thing to remember is that it's not about speed. Your cards have been dealt before you get there. But for those who want to race from stop to stop, it's on. And those on board had better grab onto something. The speed factor has been removed for reasons of safety and, some would say, enjoyment. With so many boats in such a big gathering area, there are just too many fast boats and too much water. There's also the fact that for all this talk about speed, some boaters just want to take their time. Now, mind you, taking your time as a performance boat driver really just means that you're simply not racing. You're still going fast, but at your own degree of fast. And for some new passengers, it's more than fast enough. To learn more about the poker run, as well as these boaters and their rides, we sent our own Lise, Lindy, and Tanya down to the docks for a little insight. As our trio passed one incredible boat after the other, it was hard to know where to look first. And with good reason. As Lise discovered, performance boats are like most luxury items. If they catch your eye, there's probably a good-sized price tag dangling off the thing. Or two tags.
One gentleman came with two of them. He's got $2 million worth of Playboys. And it takes us $1,000 a day in gas to play with this boat.
With too much horsing around, someone has to play dad and keep the kids in line. That job usually falls to Scope founder Ron Songgrath. Ron not only created Scope, he also helps run all of the organization's events, including the poker run. As the many boaters get ready for the big day, Ron lays down the law, racing against the ticking clock in order to get the run started on time.
I do have to wear two hats for this event.
Don't tamper with, don't open up your envelopes.
They're friends, they're Scope Club members, they're guests that come here every year from out of state, and I love all these people. We all have a very good common bond. But when this weekend starts, I have to wear the hat along with Wayne Lee and the other Scope Board of Directors. We have to really put our hard shoes on and keep people in line.
The guy next to you is Johnny, professional racer. Yeah, nothing's going to bother him, but it's his grandmother in the back seat. That's the one you should be paying attention to, and you should be driving on her behalf.
This is a business weekend. There's a lot of money being exchanged between all the vendors and the participants and the winners of the event. So we really have to come down hard on people sometimes and say, hey, knock it off. You're jeopardizing our event by doing something stupid. We don't want stupid things around this weekend.
Everybody should be about 300, 400, 500 yards apart. We got 100 boats probably going to Avalon, probably 100 boats going to Newport. There's plenty of room out in the ocean. We can only say this so many times. This is not a race. Some guys are going to run hard. We know that. But it's not a race. It has no part of the outcome of this event today.
Although speed supposedly has no part of today's event, Ron and his pals do create a dilemma, telling the gang to ease the throttle, yet risk the label of poodle. What is a poodle in the somewhat competitive world of Scope? Actually, it's a term of endearment, even though most Scope members probably don't want their name near the term.
So it's kind of escalated.
Then we developed the Poodle Award, which is basically a baton that gets passed on to each guy that's got, either a blown spark plug attached to it, somebody forgot to do a water valve and nearly flooded and sunk their boat one time.
I was the original recipient of that
quite a few things to that. A Band-Aid for hitting one's other, somebody else's boat. And so it's something that goes around.
It's a term that has a history. As Lindy discovered when he cornered Ron on the docks and made him come clean about the birth, the existence, and the lowdown on poodles.
Well, Poodle probably started about 6 years ago. Yeah. And we had a few members that come up with these big, fast, dad-to-the-bone offshore boats. And, they won't go over 40 miles an hour. Or there's more than a 1-foot chop out in the Pacific, and they won't go out of a harbor. Yeah. And we had a member named Kip Grossman that started calling these people poodles.
So what is a Scope boater to do? Yes, it's not a race, but you have a fast boat and you don't want to be called a poodle. Actually, the rules of the run are both loose and strict. Strict when it comes to speed and safety, loose when it comes to how to attend and run. In some of these competitions, you can enter and not even be there. A group like Scope earns poker run cash for the sake of worthy charities. So if a boater pays the entry fee, Scope's not going to turn down the cash for the good cause. In other words, if you pay the fee and need a substitute driver, you're still going to be at the poker table.
You get there first, you get there last. Hey, the guy that won last year was a replacement for another guy that boat broke last year. That's just the way it happens.
He probably is.
So again, be courteous, be safe. We want everybody coming back in one piece. We don't want any broken boats. We don't want any broken bodies. That's our #1 priority.
There have been fast boats for a long time, but they keep getting faster. It takes skill and a steady hand to keep some of these big machines in line. Each year, the engines move further away from motors as they morph into rockets. All that on top of a surface that's not only moving, it's often putting up a fight, along with assistance from some very tall waves. The bottom line, too fast and too much white water, and the boat can flip. A rare but possible occurrence that Captain Ron refuses to allow on his watch.
It's very critical when we get outside the rocks right here. We're going to idle out to the Queen's Gate opening. We're not going to get on plane. There's going to be a fireboat leading us out. It's going to be going about 8 miles an hour, 7 miles an hour. We're going to ask you guys to stay off plane until we get outside of the Queen's Gate. There's always some boats that get a little jumpy. Well, we got our eyes out for you guys are going to jump to start this year, and we're just going to ding you. We're not going to let you win the money. I mean, this is not Scope asking you this. This is the Coast Guard demanding it.
The Coast Guard isn't the only group with an eye on performance boating. In a relatively short time, this once elite hobby has gone from the passion of a few racers to the lifestyle of many families. Thus, the creation of organizations like Scope, a club that grows and grows. When we return, Scope gets the show underway, along with a tale of how all this began. It's the true story of a man and the thought in his mind when he first boarded his craft. He thought, I can't be the only one out here who's jazzed by a really fast boat. Guess what? He was right. Once the poker run starts, Scope members will have to stay out of any restricted areas and obey certain speed limits. Failure to do so will most likely result in arrest by the Coast Guard. Also, the Scope boaters are told not to approach any naval or Coast Guard vessels. With the country on extreme alert, the officers just might have a low tolerance for horseplay. The bottom line, all the drivers are told to boat safely. Super safely. Part of that safety involves the wearing of life vests, a once bulky garment that has come a very long way in the style department. While the old school vests are legal, Scope reminds its more fashion-minded members that still pictures and video will be shot during the event, asking, how's it going to look when you show your buddies that tape of you in that old orange horse collar? This is the 11th annual poker run that Scope has thrown, and the setting is a slightly overcast yet beautiful but sometimes foggy June 1st in Long Beach. The whole shindig also includes a number of get-togethers as the boaters arrive, a big fat party the night before the run, and a silent auction featuring many cool items and wild surprises, all to benefit the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. As our own Lindy sat down with Scope founder Ron Songrath, he learned that last year, Scope raised over $30,000 for juvenile diabetes research. As a fundraising organization, that's a long way to come in a few short years. And to think it all started because Ron Songrath could not contain himself when he got his first boat, realizing there were other people out there. People driving boats a bit like his.
When you saw these people, I was dying. It was dying inside of me to find out. And I thought it very funny that these people that have performance boating have a very common bond. I mean, everybody's got a car and, everybody's got a place to live, but such a small percentage of our population has an offshore performance boating. So it's a strong, strong bond, even stronger than golfers, in my opinion.
Stronger, perhaps, thanks to a factor that more than likely separates most golfers from most performance boat owners. First, foremost, and all the way around, performance boating is a family sport. It's an activity that brings out the kids as well as the adults. And that's something you rarely, if ever, see out on the links. Whole families, boat after boat, and huge multi-million-dollar corporate sponsors. These are all things that Ron could not have envisioned when he first put together Scope and its inaugural poker run. It wasn't that long ago. But when Songgrath compares it to where the organization is today, it feels as though it happened a couple lifetimes ago. Back in those quaint early years of the 90s.
We started in, I believe it was 93, with just a poker run out of Newport Beach. I believe it was in March or April, and we had a rain out one weekend, and we came back the following weekend. We had, I believe, 21, 22 boats show up. We ran it off the fuel dock in Newport Beach. Just come by and sign in, and we gave you a registration card and signed you up and told everybody to put their boat away afterwards, and we'll meet you at the Cannery restaurant for a little appetizers and a few drinks. And I think the winner walked away with maybe $300 or $400. We just split the entry fee. It was probably $50 at the time, and you know, at that time, if you'd have told me we'd be where we are today, I'd say no way in the world.
No way in the world.
It just started with 21 boats, and the next year I think we hit 33 boats, and all of a sudden, wow, we hit 50 and 60 and 70 on out until 3 years ago in 2000, year 2000, we hit the magical, that was always my goal, hit the 100 mark. We came in with 101 boats in 2000, and I was in complete shock and totally ecstatic.
That's the way we know that you're at the driver's meeting.
He was totally ecstatic, but on a day like today, Ron has to remember that old saying about being afraid what you wish for. He's going to have his hands full as he tries to keep safety in the forefront as he hosts this year's poker run. A run that will feature many boaters. Boaters who know that this is no race, but still, that probably won't keep them from thinking that this is the place where speed rules.
It's a place where boaters really, I strongly feel, have to get rid of the ego out there. And that's tough because a lot of these guys, they have these 100+ mile-an-hour boats.
Oh, yeah.
There's ego involved, and they want to be the first one of the island, although the race and the speed of your boat has nothing to do whatsoever with this game.
A poker run is not a race. It's just actually it's a fun run, and you go from point to point to pick up cards.
So pretty much in a poker run, speed is not as much of a factor.
It's not a factor, but it is a factor. Everybody likes to go fast.
Okay, in a poker run, it's an ego run.
Yeah, it's an ego.
So people with the bigger pocketbooks will run their ego, and their egos run real fast.
Sharing the seas with slower boats who want to keep things slow, performance boat owners are always on guard.
We have no choice. They have really come down hard. They've threatened us with tickets, arrest, or not being able to hold this event next year. If you guys are having fun, you want to come back next year, please cooperate and help us out here. It's very important. And again, we want to do this every year. And again, it gets tougher every year, as all of you know, your jobs, whatever. Big Brother's always watching, and they're watching us more than ever.
They're watching as closely as Ron says for a pair of simple reasons. Performance boating is a sport that grows every day. And these boats keep finding new and exciting ways to pack more and more dynamite into those nautical engines. In other words, it's growth on two fronts. More horsepower and more boats. Ron knew that more boats were on their way when he first founded Scope. But even he couldn't have guessed at the rate of expansion when he created this club. A club of boaters who shared more than the desire to go fast on the water. They shared something simpler than that. They shared a thing called camaraderie.
My goal is to start an organization or a club and keep it very simple, more of a social type club, and see if I could get these type of boaters, boat owners, together as one unit and introduce them to each other. Make it a social type of deal where it'd be a lot of fun. Bring in the marine industry and all the engine builders and riggers and the suppliers, and maybe bring everything together and introduce everybody to one another and see if there'd be chemistry there.
As it turned out, there was more than chemistry. Some members swear they didn't find their best friend until they got that boat and got into the club. A club that has outings all year, even without those big engines. These people will race on anything from go-karts to paddle boats. Through the years, as Ron has seen Scope grow in size, other evolutions in the club have taken place as well. Evolutions such as going beyond the enjoyment of performance boating into the activity of raising big money for worthy charities.
2 or 3 years ago, we had a couple of key members say, you know, we do a lot of neat things. We have a lot of fun. We're really, for the most part, a very fortunate group of people to have such a a prestigious a type of hobby where, you know, it's an expensive hobby, but we have fun, and we thought we have such a powerful group of members here. Let's maybe put something together and try to help out some people maybe that are less fortunate or maybe need an assistance or help.
Today's poker run will do just that. But Songrath knows the thing has to get underway first. On the Sunday morning of the actual run, he takes the stage as well as the microphone, loudly cracking the whip as he demands cooperation, giving no slack to those who might have stayed a bit too long at the party the night before. With the assistance of poker run director Wayne Lee, Ron makes sure that every boater knows where they can boat, how fast and when, and just how to collect the cards that will determine the winners. Regarding these pre-run meetings, Ron Songrath and Wayne Lee insist that the vast scope membership is neither inattentive nor too eager to hit the throttle without the rules. But if these rambunctious boaters are getting harder to wrangle with each and every year, rightly or wrongly, one might attribute it all to the size of the toys.
Every year, it's just, 11 years now, every year, it just, the bar gets set up higher and higher, and the boats, the equipment, the accessories, it just grows every year. It becomes more exotic and more extreme, and I told a gentleman earlier today, he says, wow, the boats are incredible. I go, what's incredible is the best boat here this year will probably be about the 10th finest boat here next year. Yeah. So if you're playing the game to be the best, you might win it one year, but you won't win it the next.
And on the subject of winning, nobody's going to win this year's poker run if Ron and Wayne can't organize the troops and get the event underway. When we come back, Songrath insists that the green light will be flashing and those boats will be roaring. Let's hope he's right. If not, we'll never know who holds the best hand, who gets the top prize, and who has the second fastest boat in scope. And if we don't know who has the second fastest boat, then we won't be on our way to revealing the fastest boat here today. As we've learned so far, Scope is a Southern California club of people with some of the finest, fastest performance boats around. It was founded by Ron Songrath, a man who wanted to share the fun.
Back in the late 80s, I got a 30-foot Scarab, started doing a little performance boating, and enjoyed it tremendously. And at that time, there wasn't really a great number of offshore boats out there out of Newport Beach and the Pacific Ocean, between Long Beach and Catalina. I would see boats, and I was always intrigued, like, if you ran across another performance boater, who was that guy? Yeah. Where's he from? Yeah. What does he do? And I want to learn about his boat.
Ron learned about all their boats, enough to get everybody together and host the annual Scope Poker Run, an event that's part card game, part unofficial race, and part, if not altogether, generous in its goal to raise cash for juvenile diabetes research. With the run about to get underway, Ron is very busy cautioning all around about awareness and boat safety.
Boats break, outdrives or steering systems break, and boats can hook all of a sudden, and a boat that's 100 feet to your right can all of a sudden be right on top of you. And so the key is to keep your distance. There's no lane, there's no freeway out there. You have as much width as you want. I encourage everybody, I'd like to see everybody about 3 miles width of boats, and everybody's a quarter of a mile apart. And if you see somebody kind of getting over into your territory, get out of his way, slow down, come off plane, whatever it takes.
By the way, as big as Scope has grown in the last few years, there are still those in the boating world who need an introduction to the organization. Ron claims that a responsibility comes along with that introduction. A responsibility to answer an important question that many people have. The all-important question? Hey, Ron, where'd the name come from?
Well, Scope stands for the Southern California Offshore Powerboat Elite.
Scope stands for the Southern California Offshore Powerboat Elite. We're basically a club of, just boat nuts.
Pretty easy to say we were a Southern California boating club, and we were offshore type of boats, and we just threw in the performance, and then the E, I figured we'd throw in the E to, Scope, it was a good name there. The people recognize that name, and they know what you're talking about when you say you're from Scope. So Southern California Offshore Powerboat Elite. And the elite stands for exceeding limits and total excitement.
While the E in scope stands for everything from elite to exceeding limits as well as excitement, it could also stand for exasperation at the moment. Ron has more than heads to count. He's going to have to play traffic cop here. If he can get the run underway, Ron's going to see a world of boats out there on the Pacific today. Boats that better have some pretty sharp drivers at the wheel.
The last year and this year, we're going to have 160 boats out there, basically with 2/3 of them, about 100 running towards Avalon. And there's helicopters flying with photographers and cameramen and video people, and each driver has to really be focused on driving that boat and not looking at a helicopter or not looking at the boat next to him on his right. He's got to be totally aware of his surrounding, not only what's in front of him, to the left and right, port, starboard, whatever you want to say, but know who's behind you. It takes a great deal of attention and focus, a lot more so than just doing a regular run with just 2 boats going to Avalon.
More boats mean more boaters. And more boaters means variety. Scope members come in all ages, a couple of genders, and a multitude of personalities. While some of these folks take matters quite seriously, others find little to be serious about. And why not? Between the fast boats and the fun people, it's actually a chore to not have a good time around here.
Do you use this boat primarily for poker runs?
No, I just play with it around here. I go to Catalina for a $250 ice cream cone, and I go down to Newport Beach. And we have, a $375 lunch.
Basically, there are only 2 constant elements of scope that never veer into the humorous. Safety in those boats, and getting the raised funds to all of the chosen charities. Charities that Scope started working with back when Ron and the club first decided that they were in a good position to be giving. And speaking of assistance or help, let's check out the hand a boat needs when it's finding its way to the drink. In case you might have guessed by now, it's no small thing getting these trophies from here to there, and then back to here again. In the world of performance boats, you're always going to find that one guy who can pay a crew to do all this for him. He's known around the clubhouse as Mr. Lucky. But if you don't happen to be Mr. Lucky, you'll need a half a ton's worth of machinery, a steady eye when your truck's in reverse, and a fair amount of pre-organized time. This is not an exercise that can be rushed. Every boater has a story about Mr. Unlucky who messed up. The tales are legend on the docks. That guy who backed up into another boat, or the other guy who let his truck slide in. The bottom line is experience and a good degree of education in the practice. It's like every aspect of this sport. A sport that allows anyone with a fat checkbook and the need for speed to hit 150 out there on the raging seas. It's facts like those that help make Scope what it is. A place where new boaters can learn from people who've been out there dealing with high waves and high octane for years. Of course, one of those longtime boaters is Scope founder Ron Songrath, a club organizer who can still remember back when his membership first took their good times and converted them into cash for charities. 2 of their early tasks when they decided to do that, choosing the charity and reminding themselves that they'll need to walk before they can run.
We started out on a very small scale and we picked a charity 3 years ago at our poker run, the Cody Unser Foundation. Very worthwhile foundation that Wayne League was personally involved with Cody Unser. And we decided, hey, let's pick a charity. Let's see if we can raise some money. And just by people adding a few dollars to their entry fee and just have a silent auction on a smaller scale. And all of a sudden, we raised $17,000 2 years ago for this foundation. And this little girl, a 14-year-old girl who has this disease and is paralyzed, I mean, she's there taking the check from us, and she's in tears, and her mom's in tears, and we saw that just touched us such a great deal, and we said, this is something that we have to continue.
And continue they did, right up to this very poker run in Long Beach today. A poker run that's having too good a time on land, when it's supposed to be out there on the water having that good time. Part of this delay has a lot to do with that whole issue of camaraderie. These good friends don't get to see each other every day, and if they all go out and hop into their separate respective boats, they'll have to stop chatting and catching up with each other. It's a real dilemma. Real dilemma or not, Ron Songrath has a job to do as he organizes this poker run and tries to get it going on time. A job that has consequences if all this doesn't flow smoothly. When the State Coast Guard and other officials are told that an event will start and be over at certain times, that's a serious deal. It's the kind of serious deal that trumps the real dilemma of needing more time to pass around photos of the kids or share the latest hot gossip about you-know-who. When we return, we were about to say that Ron will have that poker run underway when we return. But we're at the point of crying wolf on that issue. In fact, the truth be known, we don't know if Ron Songrath and Scope will get this year's poker run out of the starting gate at all. Quite frankly, it's pretty much up in the air at this moment. If this year's run doesn't take place, it won't be through the fault of Captain Ron, a man who insists that this poker run for Scope members will happen with or without the cooperation of Scope members. He swears by it.
Clock is starting to tick. We got to get this meeting kicked off here.
He was a much cheerier man this morning. It seems so long ago, a few hours back, before it was all running somewhat less smoothly. In the AM, when we asked Scope founder Ron Songrath what he was up to with the early sun rays hitting the Pacific, we caught up with the man as he was tending to his high-speed mistress.
Getting the run in with the devil, 38 cigarette, getting it ready for the big run today, the poker run. And trying to figure out how to put these props on. I've only done it maybe, I don't know, a few hundred times, and sometimes the teeth don't want to just match up, and you just got to do here and do a little experimenting. And you have to be careful when you're putting them on, since it's not stainless steel, it's hardened steel, and it's very susceptible to digging up the shaft, which we don't want to do. And always got to make sure, if you have counter-rotating props, always got to make sure and put your props on right, because you don't want to put it in forward and go backwards. So we're just doing that for today, and that's probably about after taking off the cover of the boat. That's the first thing, is get the props on and get them on right, and make sure they're on tight.
Ron did get his props on tight, but that was at the start of this busy day, when everything was operating nicely. Now he's trying to wrangle the vast Scope membership into order and get the poker run underway, in spite of a Southern California sky that keeps flipping from sunshine to fog. All of these obstacles remind Ron of the many steps it takes, each and every year, to make this complicated event go from the planning stages into reality.
11 years ago when we first started, it was a pretty easy event. Just put out a flyer and let's meet and let's go have fun for a day. But now with 150 plus boats showing up every year, it's turned into a well-coordinated, well-planned event. Yes, there is insurance. We have liability insurance for the entire 3-day event. It covers the event, liability to spectators and the participants of our run. The red tape aspect of the event has become incredible. From just getting a permit to use the dock facility in Long Beach, it's stretched well beyond that to getting event permits with the city of Long Beach, to get a Coast Guard permit to put a bunch of boats out on the water and run around like a bunch of young kids having a good time, which we're not, but we're old kids having a good time.
As word made the rounds that Ron had just referred to some of the Scope membership as old kids, requests found their way back to Ron. Requests that Ron Songrath should only speak for himself. And some of those protests came from actual kids themselves. As we've seen, performance boating is one of the few and perhaps only sports where high-speed, high-octane engines can mix with actual participation by the whole family. And at this very moment, whole families of boaters are waiting for the green light on this year's poker run. But before that light can flash, the event's rules have to be established and the gray weather has to cooperate. It's a combo that frustrates Ron to pieces. All this after Ron Songrath and his crew have spent countless days gathering fees, applications, and permits, so Scope can run things in a totally above-board manner.
You got to get permits from all the lifeguards along the way, along the Orange County coast, and from Newport to Long Beach. You got to check in with the Avalon Harbor Department. You basically have to let everybody know you're coming, and of course they all want forms to be filled out and approved and signed off on, and they all want to know that you're insured, and they want to know who you are and where you came from and what you're trying to accomplish.
And what's Ron trying to accomplish at this moment? He's trying to explain that the Scope Poker Run is a game where boaters go from one ocean stop to the next, gather pre-sealed playing cards that are waiting for them, and get back to shore to see if their cards add up to a winning poker hand. A hand that can deliver big cash prizes. But because some boaters want to go fast, a few think it's a race.
To a lot of people, the poker run is just something maybe they've heard of, but really don't know what it's all about. Everyone's big fear, of course, is that we're putting on a race, and we're not. It's a game of chance, and it's a social outing. But the city permits for all the vendors, permits for the food, permits from the alcoholic beverage control people for the post-event party. So they really put us through the ringer.
They all put Ron and his boys through the ringer, and now Scope has to deliver, presenting a well-oiled poker run that's both on time and on course in the water. All this business that started simply because a boater and his boat wanted to play in the water with other boaters and their boats. A situation that grew into Ron now having to attend many a meeting just to make the thing all come together.
There's a number of monthly meetings that we go to and appear before the managers, from the lifeguard to the Coast Guard. They're all there at these meetings. The fire marshal is there because we're hooking up electricity and generators. And there's probably about 10 or 12 officials that sit at this meeting and just give you funny looks. And they give you the look like, we really don't care about you, and we'll humor you and listen to what you have. And they ask lots of questions, and then they'll usually email you or fax you with a sheet of about 20 demands that have to be met in order for them to sign off on your event.
They all signed off, and with Scope putting on this fun charity run for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, you'd hope the thing could go off without a hitch. But, as we've discovered, that's an easy notion to assume from the safe sidelines. One clear delay appears to come from the intrusive chat that buzzes throughout the all-important drivers' meeting. But like any proud, protective parent defending his overly eager children, Captain Ron has a multitude of excuses for the behavior of those kids he loves. Those big kids who make up the membership of Scope.
The poker run's a 3-day weekend, and it starts on Friday, and it really Sunday morning is the actual run. And I think by Sunday morning at 8 o'clock we have our drivers' meeting, and the masses are ready to go. The hormones, the testosterone is all built up within everybody, and for a lot of them, they're repeat visitors, and they've heard the speech about the safety concern and how to be courteous of other boaters. They're ready to jump in their boat and turn up the volume with the horsepower.
And with this much horsepower at your fingertips, who wouldn't want to jump in and just turn up the volume? And speaking of volume, some of these boats are as loud as they are cool. For many performance boaters, their vessels are cool because they're loud. It's a pride of decibels that almost seems to say, the louder the boat, the bigger the driver's engine. Boats this cool just could not have hooked up with a game that wasn't equally as cool. And nobody in the history of games has ever been able to take the cool away from poker. It's a perfect union that Ron remembers hearing about a few years ago.
It's something that I think started with car clubs, motorcycle clubs, and then about 11 years ago when we started Scope, I had heard of some organizations running poker runs in the East. 11 years ago, they were a very small factor concerning performance boating. You didn't read about them, and really it was only by word of mouth that you knew about poker runs existing. And then all of a sudden, the magazines, 6-7 years ago, started doing features on poker runs around the country, and we've had ours covered several times in major magazines. And today it's become the fad.
That fad is quite small compared to the fad-like explosion that first rocked the world when the early performance boats broke out onto the scene. It was only a few years ago, years some of us recall with shows like Miami Vice, and news stories about fast drug runners, and even faster law enforcement boats out off the coast of Florida. Those are all images of the past, but Ron remembers those days.
The offshore powerboat was really started in Florida, Don Aronow being the founder, and from what I understand, a lot of times they made some go-fast boats, and all of a sudden the drug dealers off of Florida saw it as a tool to get their trade onto the mainland, and so it became kind of blended in and say, wow, it's an offshore boater, they're a drug runner. And of course I think that now has been pretty much eliminated, and I think that form of transportation in the country for drugs has been pretty much eliminated. But it started out really on a bad foot. They were fast boaters, they weren't sailboaters, they were noisy boaters, and some of them were doing illegal things.
Hold the phone, this just in. The 11th annual Scope Poker Run is on hold. In other words, the whole thing looks like it's off. Ron? What's going on here?
We're on a hold right now, and of course you can imagine from this event, it scares the heck out of us right now. We need that fog to lift, and you know, if we can't get this thing started within 2 hours, that means our back's really to the wall. So we have a high alert right now, and we're just got to wait and sit by the phone and keep our fingers crossed and maybe say a prayer.
Yes, the Scope Poker Run featuring America's coolest performance boats is on the brink of being canceled. This hazy, strange June weather presents sun for one moment, then fog. All this after Ron and his team have worked their rudders off.
Our concern right now is we came in this weekend, we've had some really weird weather for Southern California. A lot of fog and haze the last few weeks. Yesterday was just an absolutely beautiful day. We're really excited. It looks like we had a window of opportunity, but now we just received a call from the Coast Guard, and right now we're on a temporary hold.
It's a temporary hold that could become permanent. If the fog lasts beyond the time window Scope has been granted by the Coast Guard. It's a problem that can only solve itself. In the meantime, our goal is to take poor Ron's mind out of that fog and back into the world of performance boating. Asking him to tell us more about the big ups and downs of this wild sport.
Probably one of the biggest downfalls to our hobby and our passion here is any person can come off the street and plop down a couple $100,000 and get themselves a 85-mile-an-hour offshore performance boat.
It's why fog is such a non-starter. Imagine 150 boaters, some experts, some new guys, all roaring in a soup that some weathermen might call limited visibility. And new performance boaters can hop directly into that soup if the price is right.
If they have the money, they get the boat. And they can just take that boat right down to the launch ramp and plop it in the water, and off they go. They don't even have to have a driver's license to do that. There's no certificate, there's no training. They can just get in it and go. And for an experienced boater, that's probably the scariest part of our sport, is you never know, if you don't know the person next to you, you never know what kind of background they have, what kind of experience.
Experience and safety are, of course, two of the staples of Scope. The Deluxe Club that Ron founded, nurtured from small to large, and now watches over. As new boaters join, and occasionally undergo one of Ron's interrogations. Quizzes that feature safety-themed questions, such as...
do they know who has the right of way? Are they really paying attention? Are they drinking beer and driving a boat? Is a person really crazy next to you?
Is that person really crazy next to you? If that's not a safety-related question, then we don't know what is. Actually, as Ron will explain, there are many forms of crazy in the world of performance boating. There's crazy about your boat, crazy about Scope, and even crazy about letting Ron clarify his crazy comment, as well as having him tell us more about the problems inexperienced, careless boaters can bring to the water.
And when I say crazy, I just mean crazy in a daredevilish way, willing just to do things, doesn't know the capacity of his boat, what type of water the boat will work in. They think, wow, my boat goes 78 miles an hour, and no matter what the water conditions, they want to see that speedo hit 78 miles an hour. And for the person that does that, they're endangering themselves, their crew, and of course the boaters around them.
As we talked with Ron, trying to keep his mind off the fog-jammed event that was now on hold, word reached the Scope captain. Word that a pal of his just broke a drive shaft merely idling in the harbor. It was an occurrence that made us ask about the upkeep on these incredible performance boats.
Boats are a real temperamental animal. I think probably the best way to relate it is maybe to an exotic sports car that always has to be kept really finely tuned, and you gotta keep them up, keep them maintained. Probably because of the environment we we play in, the salt water environment especially. Salt water doesn't mix well with metal, and a lot of our boats have high performance engines ranging from anywhere from 500 to 1200 horsepower engines, and of course you go out and there's no speed limit out in the ocean, so people like to get in their hot rods and go and test their driving ability, test the performance of their boat, and see if they can hit their maximum speed.
Ron claims that some of these boats can be a bit too souped up for their own good, or at least tricked out wrongly with mismatched parts. Combining giant motors with propeller shafts that are a bit too thin when the drivers try to hit full throttle.
When they do that, the engines are under incredible load because those boats, they're 8 to 10, 12,000 pounds, and you've got those engines with those propellers pushing that boat along at sometimes 100 miles an hour.
Engines, propellers, none of this talk was taking Ron's mind off the poker run. The man was clearly beating himself up inside, wondering if he was somehow responsible for a late start that was then eclipsed by fog. Did he fail to wrangle the troops in time? So many questions, but only one answer. An answer he was forming. And once it was formed, he said it.
These people are here for the weekend, and it's this weekend. They're not coming back next weekend. We don't have hotel reservations next weekend. We don't have dock slips next weekend. One way or the other, this thing's got to go today, and I mean today. Tomorrow's Monday, people are back at work. We're at Sunday. This is it. It's D-Day.
And with that bold pronouncement, Ron Songrath took matters in hand and told the members of Scope that the 11th annual poker run was on. And on now.
He's on the phone.
Oh, yeah. A lot of Ron's newfound determination came after the Coast Guard phoned and told our man that the fog had lifted, the skies were clear, and that Scope had better get it in gear and get those boats out on the water. What, you think Ron was just going to diss the law? With the green light flashing and the big flags dropped, the performance boats of the club zipped across the blue ocean at speeds no poker run had ever seen before. Within seconds, it became a roaring party of whitewater and high card collecting, quickly establishing itself as one of the great Scope mega events of all time. In record time, Scope members had their cards and hightailed it back to base camp, where the kings and queens were tallied up and the big winners were determined. As the final hour was drawing near, Captain Ron held court at center stage, handing out all that fat loot.
Nick, are you here? Yell, raise your hand, scream, do jumping jacks. Here he comes. Oh yeah, he's doing the jumping jacks, all right. One more time, couple more jumping jacks. There we go. Nick, way to go.
Heart attack. I haven't won in my life. Thank
Congratulations, nice job, $750.
Can I say a few words?
Real quick, please.
No, it's all right.
Over here, it's all right.
I'm just joking.
All right, no jokes allowed. We're pretty serious up here. 3 aces and 2 sevens. Joe Piedamonte. Wow, Joe had a hell of a day. Brought his brand new Outer Limits out here with a mega horsepower. He was the second boat to Catalina and had a blast. He came about 3 years ago in a Scarab from Fresno and says he's coming back, that he shall return, and he did.
And when all was said and done, thousands of dollars went to juvenile diabetes research, and a good time was had by everybody. Poker Run director Wayne Lee deserved much of the credit for keeping the whole party afloat, and a lot of backslapping also had to go to his tireless crew as well.
Be safe, God bless, see you next year.
Hey! And Scope founder Ron Songrath? He had an ocean of emotions and thoughts now that the event was over. Emotions and thoughts that were familiar. These notions and ideas were similar to those Ron had after last year's run.
For the board of directors, there is massive relief when this event is finished. It has turned into quite a project for all of us. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of preparation, and the 3-day weekend, it's an incredible amount of stress and load on ourselves to make sure everything is absolutely perfect. So when the run is over with, we've handed out the money, people are walking away and going home. We're thrilled, and we're even more thrilled to know that it was an injury-free event. That's our big goal now every year. And when you have 150 boats, things are going to go wrong.
But for every one thing that went wrong at this year's poker run, 1,000 things went right. And there's no doubt that Scope will be back next year, driving those great performance boats. Boats that are just a small part of this amazing, incredible world of blue speed.